Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Patrick and Aren, and thanks for coming and joining us tonight for the first NCA webinar of the Armenian Bar Association. We are being recorded. The participants are not going to be visible on the screen. It's just us, the panelists. I'm going to introduce myself, and then I'll turn to you, gentlemen. So I am the co-chair of the Ontario chapter of the Armenian Bar Association, which was officially given the title of a chapter this year, thanks to our ABA Global Board of Directors. And I am joined today by Patrick Bakos, who's a partner at Friedman's Law Professional Corporation, and Aren Saakyan, presently an articling student who is going to be soon called to the Ontario Bar in Canada. In terms of brief presentation, all three of us had to go through the NCA process to become qualified to practice law in Ontario. I come from a civil law jurisdiction background-wise. I've got my law degree from Russia many years back. Patrick is a US graduate lawyer, and Aren had obtained his degree from the United Kingdom. So I think I will be presenting first as to the challenges I had to go through in terms of the NCA process and my civil law education. And then I'll turn to Patrick and Aren. So I completed my law degree in Russia in 2007. In that part of the world, if you know, in civil law, most of the countries you study for 4 to 5 years and you go to university fresh off high school, and you just choose law faculty, and you don't need a bachelor degree to get into law school, or rather law faculty. And upon immigrating to Canada, I was trying to understand what, if anything, I have to do. Is there a chance for me to become a lawyer, and how long it'll take? And particularly, it was challenging because when you're an immigrant with a family, and I had a child back then, it seemed unfeasible until I met some wonderful people who were guiding me through the process. There was even a plan for me to start going to law school at some point. I even started practicing for LSATs, and thank God I did not have to do a full-time 3-year JD studies. So what I discovered, civil law jurisdiction is not the best degree to have when you're dealing with the NCA, because they do not accept, I would rather say they are unable to assess your law degree. They approve the degree for its own sake, but what they do is you basically receive a letter saying, we're unable to complete your assessment. Please, and this is the assessment I've done probably 4 or 5 years ago, and it's still the case. And Aren will definitely correct me or add some more information when it's his turn to present. So I received a letter of assessment that they virtually cannot complete my assessment. And then they directed me to complete 1 year of common law studies. And I've received a list of all Ontario law schools where I can do that. And I chose to take Osgood Hall's professional developments LLM program in just common law. Yes, it was pricey, but it was easier. And I had no choice because I never had any common law studies. So upon completing some of the subjects, I was assigned 8 afterwards. Upon completing some of them, and I think back then, the director of the Osgood Hall PD Professional Development Department, their director, Megan Thomas, she did a great job explaining me how these things work. And she told me, listen, just send your transcripts whenever you're done with 4 or 5 subjects. So upon completing 4 to 5 subjects at the LLM program at Osgood, I forwarded my transcripts to the NCA. And to my surprise, I still was very skeptical that they will accept my degree eventually. I was told, oh, wonderful. You basically completed X, Y, and Z out of your 8 subjects. Now you have remaining this, and this subject. So I don't remember now the sequence of what I did first and what was last, but I do remember I had criminal law done through the NCA and not the LLM because I couldn't squeeze everything into this 33 credits of Osgood's LLM. So I got the assessment letter relatively quickly, and then I completed everything. I resent my transcripts, and I got a word from the NCA. Okay, now you're done. You just have one criminal law exam. I did it online. It was COVID, and it was challenging. You know, you had to do it at home. I couldn't even go to the library to do the exam because libraries were closed. And within a day from the result, I requested what is called certificate of equivalence from the NCA. Now, that is a document saying this person has a degree that is equivalent to Canadian JD. And that's what I requested to be forwarded to my local law society. Now, you folks can be from anywhere, from other provinces, so you have to forward your NCA certificate of equivalence to your local bars, and you have to mention your candidate number. Candidate number, I mean, when you register for the licensing process, you're assigned a candidate number regardless of the province. And miraculously, and to, I guess I was super lucky, the Law Society received it within 1 business day. They received the letter, and obviously not the original, but it helped me enough to squeeze myself into the next bar exam, which I did. Bar exams were more challenging than NCA exams and any other exam that I've ever seen, specifically from when you come from civil law jurisdiction. Exams have a different format. There's no multiple choice type of format. There's no question answer kind of format. It's completely different world. And for folks that are with us today and come from Eastern Europe or any other country that have civil law jurisdiction, they will know that, you know, our exam format is completely different. You basically, at each exam, you have to answer 2 to 3 questions. You have to expand on those, and that's basically your exam. So that was my NCA story up until the moment when I got into the LSO licensing process. I don't have much to share about the articling process. Patrick and Aren will tell you more about that, but I want to tell you that I have many, many friends and colleagues who had done the same thing as I did, whether from civil law jurisdiction or US or any other common law jurisdiction country. NCA candidates were treated a bit differently when it comes to career, overcoming career challenges. And I think you have to work hard on getting through. There was some sort of discrimination, unfortunately, or maybe actually fortunately for me, I didn't have to go through it, even though I knew a lot of terrible stories that people cannot get articling positions, et cetera. I worked for a lawyer for more than 8 years, and I stayed with that lawyer for articling purposes. So I didn't have to go through the hustle of applying, running from interview to interview. And for some of you who know, interviews, there's a season for articling position interviews. And we were told these stories, and I saw it once myself when young graduates are running from Bay Street firm to Bay Street firm. Unfortunately, some of us NCA folks are deprived of that. But again, with right networking and with a lot of adding value to your resume, you can overcome these challenges as well. So before I get to our next speaker, I want to bring to your attention, we have questions and answers period. There's a box for QAs. So those of you who have any questions, whether you have a degree from a civil law jurisdiction, US, England, Australia, it doesn't matter, or you don't even have anything yet, but you're thinking about doing this through other paths instead of going to a Canadian law school. I mean, no way encouraging, but people have different circumstances, and some may want to consider studying abroad, either for atmosphere change, or some people find LSAT exams really difficult, and perhaps that's why we want you to have questions, and we will address those for sure. So if you have any questions to me, particularly for those of you who have civil law degrees, by all means put it in the QA box at the bottom of the screen. At the end of this webinar, we will post our emails, and you can individually email us, but please make sure you direct the question to the right person. If it's anything to do with the civil law, by all means, I will have my email at the end. If it is anything to do with a degree from US, Patrick will give his email address, and Aren will be here responsible for Australia. If it's outside of that scope, by all means, email me. And I'm going to be turning to Patrick, our next presenter, and he will share his insight and experience into the NCA process as a US trained lawyer. Patrick? Patrick, can you hear us? I think we have some technical difficulties with Patrick's connection. Now we lost him completely. Patrick, are you back?
Hi, good evening. Sorry, just had a bit of a connection issue, but I'm back. Thank you, Elina, for that introduction. Experience writing the NCA exams and going through the process dates back to January 2010. So that's when I actually I had to write 4 NCA exams. And, of course, we're talking with acronyms and abbreviations, and just so everybody, especially those who are perhaps not familiar with the process, I'd like to give out the full name. So NCA stands for, of course, the National Committee of Accreditation, which is a standing committee of the Federation of Law Societies of Canada, on which there's various members of deans from various Canadian law schools that sit and determine the process by which internationally graduated law students become the equivalent of a Canadian graduate, so that they can ultimately be admitted to one of the various law societies or bars within a province or territory of Ontario. So my experience was, I went to law school in Lansing, Michigan. The law school was called Thomas M. Cooley Law School, which is, I believe, now affiliated with Western Michigan University, still called Cooley Law School, but under the WMU branch. And so in 2010 in January, I can tell you that the experience I had with the National Committee of Accreditation was pretty smooth, but I will like to add that there was constantly changes being made to the requirements of students from different jurisdictions. So, for example, when I wrote the 4 exams in January 2010, the sitting before me was in the fall or winter of 2009, and an equivalent graduate to me, from the U.S. Common Law School, would have had to write 5 NCA exams. I wrote 4 in January 2010, and I believe they changed it to 3 in the next sitting, which would have been in spring or summer of 2010. So it was changing. I'm not sure. I think perhaps Aren could speak to that, and if he doesn't, and he gets into the more of the practical exam aspect components of the NCA, the actual NCA's website is quite informative. on the process, and they're pretty receptive on questions as well. I do know that they do gauge you and analyze your particular experience at the time. Again, back in 2010, it mattered how well you did in school, as well as what school you went to and what jurisdiction, whether it's civil law, common law. They took a look at the courses that you did to make sure on an individual basis whether you did well enough in a school with similar enough courses to a Canadian law school that they should give you your equivalence of a Canadian graduate. Ultimately, what the aim for everybody is during the NCA process is to get, as Elina said, a certificate of qualification, which gives you essentially the which makes you the equivalent of a Canadian law school graduate. So the experience I had during the four exams that I took, and just so you know, everyone knows, and perhaps it matters, perhaps it doesn't, but the four exams.
I think we lost Patrick again. Patrick, are you here? In that case, perhaps we can ask our admin, do you see Patrick? No, you don't. I think Aren will be taking over from here until Patrick returns back. So in a couple of words, I'm going to reintroduce Aren. Aren Saakyan is an articling student completing his articling term this December. And we're hoping he will get his call to the bar in January, because we don't know what the dates are for administrative calls in 2024. It may be either January, February, or March. Aren, do you know what your dates are?
I was hoping that it's going to be January 15th, one of the options for admin call.
Let's hope it's January, and I'm gonna do my premature congratulations to you now for becoming a member of the bar. And please take it from here until Patrick returns and continues on. So you have your allocated 15 minutes, and Aren will be talking about his experience as a UK trained lawyer. Oh, Patrick is back?
Yes.
Yes, Patrick, I apologize. I was going to ask Aren to take over, but yes, please continue. We're all ears.
Yes, my apologies, everybody. Just connection issue. Unfortunately, these things are happening more and more nowadays when we're using technology and Zoom. But anyway, my apologies for that. So where I left off, I was discussing the four exams that I wrote in my experience with the exams, now 13 years ago, approximately. And I didn't take them lightly. They were quite difficult. In fact, I found them to be even more difficult than the licensing process exams, being the barristers and solicitors exams of the law society, like basically the bar exams. I'm sure things have changed with respect to the NCA exams and the bar exams since, but they're not to be taken lightly. But they're certainly doable. Fortunately, I just want to speak a little bit about my articling experience as well. So step one is getting your NCA. So now you're an equivalent of a Canadian graduate. Next step is completing your practical component to become a licensed lawyer. In Ontario, the licensing is governed by the Law Society of Ontario's process. So the one, I guess, piece of advice I can give people who are interested in becoming a equivalent of a Canadian graduate and potentially getting their license in Ontario or somewhere in Canada is to start the looking for a placement early. And that's sort of, I guess, the discrimination CA graduates compared to Canadian law school graduates.
Patrick, I apologize. What last we heard was to start the process early, and then we lost you briefly. Can you repeat what you were saying after that you're encouraging people to start looking for a placement early? Aren, can you please take over from here before
Yes,
Patrick
sir.
comes back?
Yes, I think that it would be perhaps wise for him to give that vision of what to do perhaps after you complete your NCAs, potentially after my part, because it chronologically follows that way. So I don't know if you can let him know that that would be the case. I can follow from now on.
Yeah, just present your part as a UK trained lawyer, and then Patrick will pause briefly and we'll continue into the articling process, okay?
Yes, thank you. So my name would be Aren Saakyan. As my friend already introduced me, I have completed my bachelor's of law in the UK and City University of London. And I was going to try to provide some reasons why one might actually consider doing the LLB abroad rather than doing it in Canada, as well as put my 5 cents into some practical issues that I've encountered, and give some suggestions for people to have some, I would say, a more easier, understandable path to tackling the exams, so that the time that you spend listening to me presenting isn't wasted. So yeah, first I'll perhaps start with some of the pluses of the LLB abroad that I've encountered, and I've heard from my friends, as well as I had many students who actually studied abroad and then they were qualified to practice in Ontario. First was that when choosing a UK school, there was quite a contingent of people who was somewhat unwilling to write the LSAT for many reasons. It was time consuming as well as challenging for most, perhaps even stressful, and there were people who were interested in alternative paths. Simply, some people due to anxiety. More practically speaking, UK schools were more affordable in relation to the programs that are 3 years long and are provided by Ontario law schools. In my experience, in 2015, I was paying for my course. I believe it was £13,000 a year. And the program was 2 years long. Therefore, that's an additional plus, not just the amount that you would pay for the course, but the length of the course itself. UK is rather a popular choice, as the jurisdictions are quite similar, and World Education Services recognize UK degrees much easier than any other jurisdiction. I would say there are 2 schools in particular that I would suggest to take into consideration if you are looking at the UK as your alternative to an Ontario law school. One would be City University of London, which was the one that I had been admitted to, and then there is a program that is quite similar. It's also a graduate entry program that is very similar and was having a high regard. It's the St. Mary's School of Law. However, although I mentioned the pluses, there were some minuses. One of the minuses would be that once you receive your LLB, NCA comes in, and NCA normally can be from 5 courses and up. I've personally taken 7 NCA exams. I do note that some people have been assigned 5 exams and lower, but normally, if you've completed an LLB abroad, it would be from 5 to 8. I believe it has been an additional legal writing course, if I'm not mistaken, added. I would say that the writing of the exams on average would take anywhere from 6 months to a year. Could even take much longer than that. I've heard stories of people having a few years on these exams. I would say that it's quite possible to do them in around 9 months. That was my experience. And And I think it's quite doable within that timeline if you have a well strategized approach to the exams. Another minus I would suggest would be the work search, as my friends noted. Yeah, Ontario firms have a particular process of having law students participate in their 2L, 1L programs, which allows them to later become articling students. Therefore, when you start the process, let's say from a foreign jurisdiction, and don't have a Canadian degree, that might create some challenges. My solution to that was to look for smaller practices as they might be in need of assistance, and let's just say the influx of demand might be lower, and therefore you might secure a position. I would perhaps make a note that there are also alternatives to NCA. I've got some friends, including Elina, who had taken an LLM, and that's one way to cover the NCAs. In addition to that, the LLM would allow any student who had been trained outside of Canada have a relative competitive advantage when applying for articling positions in larger firms. As I again suggested, there was a friend of mine who completed an LLM, I believe it was from Peter Allard's school in UBC, and she became an associate in Saakyan Martineau, which is an inspiring experience in itself. So although I would say that there are minuses, there are pluses as well, and with those who are creative enough, there will always be a path forward, I would say. So first step after you've completed the LLB would be the World Education Services recognition, after which you'll be assigned the NCA, after which, if you proceed with an NCA exams, you'll be assigned the exams, as I've noted. It could be as low as 1 or 2 in case of Elina, but it can go as high as 8 or 9 in experience of some people. I would say that I'm going to try to provide at least certain strategies that I've particularly used when writing the exams, and I didn't come up with them myself. There were some friends of mine who suggested me to approach the exams that way in order to be as efficient as possible. First of all, I would like to suggest that the exam is a pass-fail exam, which is not to be taken lightly, as Patrick rightly noted. It doesn't mean it's not challenging, yet I would say that just given the amount of time the exam takes, I think it's quite prudent not to spend time trying to cover absolutely everything in every detail as we would, let's say, in any academic subject. I would say that what I did was I've tried to find the best set of notes available in the market, rather than approach it from the perspective of buying the textbooks and reading over everything that was ever produced on the subject, including the NCA notebooks that they've assigned. And then my step from there was to use the syllabus provided actually by the NCA, and I've basically filled in the syllabus trying to imagine what might the scenarios and questions be, and it has been quite straightforward from there. I've simply put a few lines of comments on every case law, every statute mentioned in the syllabus, It was an executive syllabus. It was rather short. I would think it was from 15 to 20 pages most, which I've covered toe to toe, and later there were certain subjects and topics which I've read more extensively on. However, most of them were I wouldn't say that they were as elaborate as they could be, and I've used those notes during the exam. The exam, as normally is an open book exam. Therefore, you would be able to use your notes, and if they're well organized, and if you have a table of contents which allows you to navigate through them fast enough, should allow you to have enough time. Obviously, I found that writing could be the challenging part in the exam. You have to be very efficient with writing, learn how to sort of connect several ideas in not many paragraphs, and even sometimes not in many sentences. So that should be a focus. And perhaps using the UBC past exam website and practicing after you've created your executive notes, just accessing the past exams and using the UBC exams. They're a fairly good free source which you can access immediately. That would be perhaps some things that I would want to mention. I would say that another takeaway that I would perhaps mention, it's like an honorary notice, is that you should not lose focus after the first pass, as it may become tempting. I believe that there are some courses available in case some exams are challenging. One of them would be, if I'm not mistaken, a course called, there are a few, one of them was called, if I'm not mistaken, NCA Guru. I've heard my friends taking it. They've provided me some information from there, but in my experience, if you ever get a chance to find good notes, that should be sufficient. And I would say that best of luck. I think if with enough determination, these exams should be doable as everything prior to them. So that would be my part. And thank you, Lina. And perhaps Patrick can.
Thank you, Aren. We have two questions directed to you, but we'll get to them at the end after Patrick completes the presentation. And Patrick, just maybe a hint. If you experience any further technical difficulties and you see there's some connection issues, perhaps you can turn your video off to make it easier for your internet to absorb the NCA information while you go through the presentation. Just catch up from where you left off. I just give the mic to Aren so that we don't lose our valuable time here.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And again, my apologies. So I don't have a whole lot left, but I will say that I think Aren's experience and his tips are for people looking to go through the NCA process and obtain your certificate of qualification. It'll be the most current and practical. But the one thing that I wanted to advise of all the interested parties is, if you are planning on going through the NCA process and you are planning on ultimately practicing law or getting your license in Ontario or any other province in Canada for that matter, it is important for you to start the process early of trying to find a firm that you want to article at. There is always been an issue with articling, a shortage of articling positions at firms. The Law Society of Ontario, at the time it was called the Law Society of Upper Canada, changed their articling requirements to add a law practice program that can be taken, I believe, at Metropolitan University, which was formerly called Ryerson, and as well as the University of Ottawa. I think those two schools do offer it instead or in lieu of articling. And articling is a 10-month practical process where you're actually working at a law firm, getting paid for it. You're required to get paid. There's a minimum amount that you need to be paid. and you're essentially a clerk. I guess is the closest thing that you can say. Articles of clerkship, and what you do is once you complete that, you are now then become eligible as the final step to be getting called to the bar in a province in Ontario. And of course, our experience is all that of Ontario. But again, so what I was saying before I unfortunately got disconnected was a lot of the law firms, particularly the larger ones, hire their articling students from their pool of summer students. And the summer students are often taken from a pool of attendees at Ontario law schools or Canadian law schools through what's called the OCI, the on-campus interviews, which are governed by the Law Society of Ontario and have very strict timelines and regulations of when you can apply, when you can contact candidates, when interviews are to be conducted. So I found that when my search, after I conducted and completed my NCA examinations and looked to secure an articling position, it was difficult because a lot of the firms that I was able to speak to advised me I need to wait 10 months or 8 months or a year to get queued into their process of their program that hires articling students. And I would be essentially interviewing with those persons who were either previous summer students or trying to become articling students at a firm at that time. But the people who are actually summer students at the firm, of course, have a bit of an advantage to you. So start the process early. Try to do some summer positions at a law firm that you're interested in. If not, it's not the end of the world. I did it. Elina did it. Aren's doing it. We'll all be able to get to a point where you end up conducting your articles and get called to the bar in Ontario. I'll become a licensed lawyer. So, of course, the best of luck to you all who are interested, and we will all provide our email addresses, and I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has with respect to my experience or the NCA process and my experience with it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Patrick, for that presentation. I'm going to just add a couple of words before we get to the questions and answers, and I encourage everyone to post their questions in the QA box. So when Aren was mentioning he was assigned, I believe, 7 exams, and some people get assigned 5, 4. Again, just be very, very cautious about the amount of exams you will be assigned. Don't think that, oh, Aren was from UK, he got assigned just 7, then it must be the case that I will be assigned 7 because I'm from UK, my degree is from the UK. And Lena got assigned 8, then it must be hell, I will be assigned 8. Yes, true, if you're coming from a civil law jurisdiction, then the likelihood of you being assigned more subjects is higher. And if you come from a sister jurisdiction like the UK or the United States, you will probably be writing less exams. And keep in mind that it also depends on when you graduated. If you, for example, have a degree from 10, 15 years ago, for each 5 years, they have a practice of assigning you additional subject, elective, but still you have to do that additional exam. That's what I wanted to add in terms of the subjects. In addition, lately, within the last, I believe, couple of years, they added a mandatory requirement that you have to complete a legal research and writing component to satisfy the NCAs. Unfortunately, more and more people who come from civil law jurisdictions, they don't have what is required in North America and particularly in Canada, the skill of conducting legal research and writing. It takes them more time because we from the civil law countries, we are not used to that type of research because we are codified there. We have codified laws, and we don't need to look who was sentenced to how many years because of the similar fact, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a bit of an unusual practice. That's why NCA added this mandatory requirement, and now you have to complete that course as well. It's a brief course. You probably can do it within, I believe it's 8 to 12 weeks, but don't cite me on that. Check with the NCA. And whenever you get your assessment, you will be told what to do. In addition, I wanted to say that people who have a civil law jurisdiction law degree from there, I know some colleagues who were paralegals, and they too come from different countries, Ukraine, Russia, Eastern Europe. I had people from Brazil, Italy, Spain. They too were assigned, I believe, 8 subjects. But they now are more, not that I say lenient, but they will accept that paralegal degree, not as a degree by itself, but just to satisfy the 1-year common law studies requirement, which they impose on everyone who was not exposed to common law studies. So keep that in mind. If you happen to have a paralegal diploma, certificates, I think, are not accepted, but again, don't cite me on that. You have to send your credentials to the NCA directly, and they're very good at assessing people's credentials. And briefly about Aren's remarks about WES, WES has their own way of assessing. However, keep in mind, if you have to go to a Canadian law school to complete the LLM, instead of doing NCAs by way of paying for each exam, you have to keep in mind these law schools, most of them, they do not accept WES assessment by their own, like on their own. You have to send your diplomas directly to the NCA and directly to the university. Universities can be sort of, they have their individual requirements, but what I'm saying is check with your universities whether they will be accepting WES assessment or actually evaluation rather, or they want you to have your university where you obtained your law degree from to have them sent directly, so they are satisfied there was no interference with the transcripts or diploma or whatever you degree you obtained. That's pretty much it. And now I'm gonna get to QAs. We have,
So it looks like Aren actually answered a couple of the questions.
oh, he did. Oh, he did.
Yeah, so there's the ability to do that right in the actual Q&A blocks in Zoom platform, and there is a follow-up there as well.
I guess I'm too old to be that tech savvy. Aren has taken it from there. Well, so long as nobody else has any further questions, we can just simply leave our.
I can perhaps add, just looking at the questions, I think there is a thread that is underlining them. Basically, the idea is the regular LLB in UK takes 3 years. Well, as I said, some people particularly prefer UK because it allows them to finish the process faster, as the UK does not require a bachelor's prior to the LLB. And theoretically, it's a huge benefit if you want to do an LLB there. However, I don't believe for Canadians it would be recognized as it might create some trouble in itself. What I would say is an LLB that is 3 years would allow people to be recognized in New York, for example. However, in my case, there were people who had already BAs from Canadian schools. Actually, most of my class was Canadian, and the program was a graduate entry program, and it was an accelerated program. It took 2 years only. So I hope that answers some questions. And
Aren, just to clarify, you were answering Fariha's whether the 2 year is recognized as a degree equivalent to a Canadian degree. That's
yes,
correct, right? Yes,
yes.
Fariha, I'm hoping we answered your question, but if not, Aren will leave his email address. Perhaps, gentlemen, we can rename ourselves with our email addresses, because I'm afraid our participants will not have access to the group chat. It may be only for the panelists. I'm just
Sure,
gonna
I'm happy
briefly
to do that.
rename
And
myself with my email address, just in case if anyone has any questions in the future, or cannot think about it right now, but then you may recall something that you didn't at the spot. Feel free to reach out, and we'll be happy to help with guidance or answering any questions. Well, each from our own experience. So direct it to the right person. So I think we don't have any further questions. I'm just gonna suggest that we keep our webinar running for another minute or two so that everybody can record our email addresses for the future. We just renamed ourselves with our email address, and we will be disconnecting in a moment. And gentlemen, thank you very much for taking the time off your, in one case, very, very busy practice as a partner, and in another case, very, very busy articling position, which articling students are the most sort of discriminated people. We work and work and work, and then we're not recognized, and then we become lawyers, and subsequently we are. So to our participants, I'm hoping we encouraged you to not give up if you don't have a Canadian law degree. There are options for you. And the more NCA also has now more experience in assessing variety of different types of diplomas, whereas there were days that they wouldn't even touch some of the diplomas from some of the countries, but now we are out of and past that period. So hoping to see all of you who attended, and whoever will be hearing this recording in the future. We're hoping that we will see you amongst our colleagues as no matter Ontario or other province law society members. Thank you, gentlemen, and have a good evening, everyone.